levels of humility and the levels of willing to sacrifice, the levels of love and aloha, to me, is core to the story. And it's a Hawaiian story.
The big surprise in this movie was the depth of the story. I had no idea of the history, that this was essentially an occupied nation. We knew it was going to be an important story about a major cultural figure and a great surfer. Eddie Aikau broke down the barriers to get Hawaiians in the big wave world, but the context of Hawaiian history, of a nation that had been overtaken by another nation, is the story of a culture, of a people, of a history, of a political and a social context. That has to be the foundation of the movie. The movie-making process is a collaborative process, which also means it's a contentious process. So you're making decisions all the time. Casting Eddie was a big one, so we found a guy walking along the beach in Waikiki with a parrot on his shoulder. We told the Aikaus, we found someone who looks like Eddie, and Myra goes, no. You have to bring him to meet me. I have to see what his energy is like. I want to know who this boy is. He's playing my brother. And this guy, Kamalu, very nice guy, came, sat down with the Aikaus. They asked around because, you know, it's a small community, and he was a good guy, and we were given permission to have him as our double. We know what happened when the missionaries came into Hawaii. The Hawaiian culture becomes subjugated.
Much of the society in Hawaii statehood offered all kinds of new opportunities, especially political opportunities.
Hotels were being built on Waikiki Beach because you had to give tourists the beach, the coconut trees, the luau deal.
And really, there are many, many Hawaiians who are still trying to live traditional kinds of subsistence lifestyles close to the ocean. Those are the ones who find themselves being marginalized. Hawaiians will be brought back in as tour guides, as dancers, as musicians. But it's not the identity we choose for ourselves.
Us kids was not wanted. You know, we weren't wanted on Waikiki property, you know, and I think that is what really hurts. So anyway.
So you can imagine kind of the sentiment for Native Hawaiians, the sense of injustice, and also that sense of cultural inferiority. And so while things were sort of difficult for them on land, it was only natural for them, I think, to revert to the ocean.
The one pure aspect of Hawaiian culture remained in the surf. That's where the masculinity, the warrior culture of the Hawaiians was able to stay alive. This is the last vestige of pure Hawaiian culture, is in the waves. And when the Australians, not understanding, not being sensitive, what the Hawaiians heard was, the last thing we have that's ours, you're now insulting us, you're not showing us respect. We don't mind sharing our waves with you. We don't mind competing against you, but let's do this with you understanding who we are. And that's where this conflict came in. The beautiful part of our story is, at the critical moment, Eddie was the peacemaker. He went against a lot of people who wanted to perpetrate violence as a message, which was really a reflection of an anger built up of a people over hundreds of years was going to come out in that moment. And he said, that's wrong. I am a Hawaiian, I'm as Hawaiian as they get. And I'm saying that's not the answer. That's not what aloha is. And to me, that's the real message of this movie, is be Hawaiian, be proud, be like Eddie Aikau. But that also includes, you don't get the easy out that I'm going to crack you in the head as the answer if I'm not happy.
It's very important that we find just the perfect narrator for the Eddie film. So Sam and Paul decided that Josh Brolin was the key voice that they wanted. So I picked up the phone and I called Josh's agent. I said, we're making this film on a very important person named Eddie Aikau. Josh will want to know about this. And eventually, he left a marvelous message himself on our answering machine saying, I have to do this.
Edward Ryan Makuahanai Aikau was only 12 years old when his parents closed up their shack at Maui's raw fish camp and moved their entire clan to the island of Oahu. In what was then known as the U.S. territory of Hawaii, Solomon and Henrietta Aikau were simply looking for a place their family could call home. It was a real sign of the times, a native Hawaiian family having nowhere else to settle but a Chinese graveyard. Yet for the Aikaus, this turned out to be a stroke of luck. Raising all the Aikau kids would require lots of room.
There's a scene in the movie when the Hokulea makes its entrance, which is the beginning of the third act, leading to the whole situation out there on the boat. You know, the last 20-30% of the movie is the Hokulea. Of course, there's no footage, there's no stills, there's nothing to cover it. So we recreated that out in the Kaiwi Channel. We went out there in fairly rough seas, 5 to 8 foot seas. Because we were being abstract, we could get away with a lot of things. Close-ups, side views, strange angles.
I think it's important to realize that it takes a filmmaker and a professional, someone who spent years studying their craft, to make a documentary that creates this kind of emotion. It's not something you can do in your youth. Paul and Sam are doing this at the pinnacle of their careers, not at the beginning. It took years to understand and to respect and to be able to have both the technical ability, the understanding of their craft, and the emotional reverence to approach the Aikaus and to be approved to make this film and to make it into something that they could be proud of.